Nobody showed up. Not even my parents. Those words haunted me for hours after I stepped into what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Imagine planning a wedding for months, pouring your heart into every detail, and dreaming about walking down the aisle with the people you love most by your side, only to find the seats empty where their faces should have been. The morning had started perfectly, my bridal suite filled with the laughter of my friends, the soft rustle of my gown, and the scent of fresh flowers. My phone buzzed endlessly with well wishes from distant relatives and colleagues, yet the one call I secretly hoped for never came. I sat by the mirror, applying makeup, trying to keep my smile intact, while a pit in my stomach grew heavier with every tick of the clock. I thought of my parents, the people who gave me life, the people I trusted to be there, to witness me stepping into a new chapter. I had imagined this moment since childhood, picturing them walking me down the aisle, their hands clasped together with pride and tears in their eyes, maybe even a few sniffles from my father, a nervous laugh from my mother. But the truth settled, like a heavy stone. They weren't coming. The moment I had dreamed about for decades, every wish I had ever whispered in a birthday prayer, or in quiet nights alone, evaporated into silence. Friends tried to console me, but their hugs couldn't fill the void left by my parents' absence. People often talk about feeling abandoned, but nothing compares to standing in the middle of a wedding hall, surrounded by guests you barely know, while the people who should be the center of your joy remain miles away, both physically and emotionally. As the music swelled and the first notes of my entrance played, I forced myself to lift my chin, to walk with grace, all while my heart screamed in quiet agony. That day, I discovered the cruel truth that love, or at least the familial kind we are promised, isn't always unconditional. And as I stepped forward, feeling every eye in the hall on me, I realized I was walking into my future alone, carrying the weight of their absence like an invisible veil around me. The ceremony progressed, each step down the aisle feeling heavier than the last. I could hear whispers of admiration from guests, some commenting on how beautiful I looked, some marveling at the decorations, and yet, their words felt hollow. Their excitement couldn't fill the empty space my family had left behind. Every laugh, every smile around me reminded me that I was alone in the most important moment of my life. I gripped the bouquet tighter, hoping the flower's fragrance would ground me, distract me from the gnawing disappointment. My groom, ever patient and loving, held my hand and gave me a reassuring squeeze. He was my anchor, the one constant, who had never let me feel like I was facing life by myself. But even his presence, as wonderful as it was, could not erase the deep sting of betrayal. I remembered the weeks leading up to the wedding, the constant texts and calls I sent to my parents, the way I imagined them coordinating every tiny detail from seating arrangements to the cake, to their speeches. I had pictured my mother adjusting my veil, whispering words of love and encouragement, my father joking nervously about my ability to survive marriage. Instead, I received nothing. No explanations, no apologies, no messages, only silence. I forced my mind to focus on the ceremony, to absorb the vows, to treasure the commitment I was making with my husband. But deep inside, a storm raged. Anger, sadness, and disbelief collided in a swirl of emotions. I had been raised to believe that family is everything, that they would be there no matter what. And yet here I was, realizing that some promises are only words and that loyalty can be conditional. Friends tried to whisper comforting words. "You're surrounded by love," they said. But what they didn't understand was that love without family often feels like a painting missing its center, a beautiful frame that holds nothing within. I told myself to breathe, to savor the day, to remember that this union was mine to celebrate, not theirs to validate. And so, with every step, I reminded myself that I was strong, that I could stand tall even if the people who should have been my support chose not to be. That realization, painful, bitter, yet oddly empowering, marked the first turning point in my journey. The moment I understood that my happiness could not be held hostage by others' decisions. The reception was in full swing, a whirlwind of chatter, clinking glasses, laughter, and music. Everywhere I looked, people were celebrating, raising toasts, dancing, capturing moments on their phones. And yet, my heart felt detached, like I was watching from behind a glass wall, unable to truly participate. Guests came up to congratulate me, asking about my parents. And I had to swallow the lump in my throat as I said, they couldn't make it. Each time, I forced a smile, nodding politely, even though the words felt like daggers slicing through my chest. I thought back to every family gathering I had ever attended, every milestone where my parents had been absent or distant, And suddenly, the patterns became painfully clear. Weddings, birthdays, graduations. Moments that were supposed to be filled with love and presence had often been marked by their absence, excuses, or empty promises. And yet, society had drilled into me the idea that family is sacred, that they would always show up when it mattered most. Standing there, in a gown I had dreamed of wearing since childhood, surrounded by people who meant well but could never truly replace them, I felt a strange mixture of grief and liberation. Grief, because the ache of missing them cut deeper than I had ever imagined. Liberation, because I realized that their absence forced me to acknowledge something important. I had the power to define what family and love truly meant for me. I began to notice the people who had actually made the effort to come, friends who had traveled hours, colleagues who had adjusted their schedules, neighbors who had arrived with thoughtful gifts and genuine smiles. They were my chosen family, the ones who had shown up when it mattered, and their presence sparked a tiny flame of warmth in my heart. Slowly, I started to engage with them, dancing, laughing, and sharing stories. The initial sting of my parents' absence began to blend with a growing sense of gratitude. Yet, every so often, a pang of longing returned, a silent wish that they were there to witness the joy, to hug me tightly, to whisper that they were proud. I had to remind myself that anger was natural, disappointment valid, but holding on to resentment could steal my happiness. And so, in the midst of the reception, I made a conscious decision. I would cherish those who chose to stand with me, celebrate every moment, and leave space for healing the wounds my parents' absence had left behind. It wasn't easy. Emotions crashed over me like waves, relentless and overwhelming, but I kept telling myself that this day, my wedding day, would not be defined by the people who didn't commit, would be defined by the love that surrounded me and the commitment I was making to my future. As the evening progressed, I found a quiet corner for a few moments of solitude, away from the laughter, music, and chatter. I needed space to process everything, the emptiness, the hurt, and the strange mixture of relief and empowerment that had begun to bloom inside me. Sitting there, I reflected on my entire life, on the subtle ways I had been let down by the people who were supposed to be my pillars of support. Childhood memories of birthdays without cards, school achievements without applause, and the countless times I had reached out for guidance only to be met with indifference flashed through my mind. For so long, I had blamed myself for their absence, wondering if I had done something wrong or if I wasn't worthy of their love. But now, seeing the effort and genuine care from friends and relatives who had chosen to be there, I realized that the absence of my parents was never a reflection of my worth. I had spent years carrying the weight of their neglect, internalizing it as my own failure, but tonight, I was forced to confront the truth. I was enough, with or without their approval or presence. A sudden sense of clarity washed over me, mingled with tears I could no longer hold back. I allowed myself to cry, not out of weakness, but as a release. A purification of all the pain I had bottled up over the years. And as the tears fell, I felt an unexpected lightness. A sense that I could finally breathe without the constant burden of longing and disappointment. My husband found me there, gently wiping away my tears, his eyes filled with love and understanding. He didn't need words. His presence alone spoke volumes. I realized that family isn't always defined by blood, it is also defined by loyalty, care, and the people who choose to stand by you through life's pivotal moments. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would cultivate a family of choice, surrounded by those who truly mattered, those who loved me unconditionally, not those who were bound by obligation. As I returned to the celebration, I walked taller, smiled brighter, and engaged with genuine joy. The music felt warmer, the laughter more heartfelt, and every toast I received became a reminder that happiness could be found in the presence of those who valued me, rather than in the absence of those who didn't. By the end of the evening, I realized that the pain of my parents' absence had not diminished my wedding, it had transformed it. It had become a declaration of independence, a testament to resilience, and a reminder that life's most significant moments don't have to be marred by disappointment when you choose to embrace the love that is actually there. In the days following the wedding, the aftermath of my parents' absence weighed on me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Invitations had been sent, calls made, and yet, no explanation ever arrived from them. The silence was deafening, a persistent echo that seemed to follow me everywhere. I wrestled with a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and even a reluctant curiosity about why they had chosen to stay away. I debated whether to confront them, to demand answers, or simply to accept their absence and move forward. Each option carried its own pain, and I realized that any action I took would be influenced not by the wedding itself, but by years of unspoken grievances and unmet expectations. I reached out once, sending a message that was carefully crafted, heartfelt, and honest, explaining how their absence had affected me. Days passed without a reply, and that silence became a mirror reflecting the patterns I had ignored for far too long. It was in that silence that I began to truly understand something crucial. Life does not owe us the presence or validation of those who fail to see our worth. My husband and I started building our life together with renewed focus, surrounded by friends who had become more than friends. They were the family I had chosen. Their laughter and support reminded me daily that bonds of love could be intentionally nurtured and deeply fulfilling, sometimes more so than the bonds I had been born into. Slowly, I began to reclaim the narrative of my life, understanding that my parents' absence did not define me, my happiness, or the love I could give and receive. I made conscious decisions to invest in relationships that were reciprocal, to nurture those who genuinely cared, and to set boundaries with those whose presence brought pain. Every small step, sharing a quiet dinner, celebrating an achievement, or simply laughing without fear of judgment, became a victory, a testament to my resilience and determination to not let disappointment dictate my life. And as the weeks turned into months, I noticed a subtle but profound transformation within myself, a newfound confidence, a clarity of purpose, and an emotional independence I had never possessed before. The wedding that had once felt like a stage for heartbreak had instead become a turning point, a catalyst for personal growth, and a lesson in the power of choosing your own family, your own love, and your own happiness, even when those you expect to be there refuse to show up. Months passed, and though the wedding day was behind me, the emotional impact lingered. I found myself revisiting memories in quiet moments, sometimes with tears, sometimes with anger, and sometimes with a strange sense of relief. Life had taught me a lesson that I had long resisted. We cannot control the choices of others, only how we respond to them. My parents' absence, once a source of shame and sorrow, began to feel like a strangely liberating truth. I realized that holding on to resentment would only chain me to the pain, while releasing it could create space for growth, for joy, and for love that was freely given. I started to explore my own passions, investing time in hobbies, career goals, and friendships that truly nourished me. My husband remained my anchor, celebrating each small victory and comforting me during moments of lingering doubt. One evening, I received a tentative call from my mother. Her voice was quiet, tentative, full of guilt and hesitancy. She explained circumstances she claimed had prevented her from attending, but the apology felt distant, almost rehearsed. I listened carefully, absorbing her words without letting them dictate my emotions. Deep inside, I had already begun to separate their choices from my sense of self-worth. Their absence had hurt me, yes, but it had also forced me to cultivate strength, resilience, and self-reliance. I realized that love is not merely defined by presence. Sometimes, it is defined by the lessons absence teaches us. I forgave not because they earned it, but because I needed to release the burden of anger from my own heart. The experience had changed me profoundly. I had become more aware of my boundaries, more intentional in my relationships, and more appreciative of the people who showed up for me, even when the ones I expected to be there did not. By embracing this truth, I discovered that happiness is not a state imposed by others, but a condition we create through our choices, our actions, and the love we cultivate intentionally. My wedding day, once a symbol of heartbreak and betrayal, had become the seed of my emotional independence. A story I would carry with me as a reminder that even in the absence of those we expect, life can be full, beautiful, and deeply meaningful. Looking back now, I see my wedding day not as a tragedy, but as a turning point, a moment that reshaped the way I define family, love, and happiness. The absence of my parents, which once felt like a cruel injustice, became the catalyst for my personal growth, teaching me lessons I could never have learned otherwise. I built a life surrounded by people who truly cared, by those who celebrated my joys and lifted me in my struggles. I learned to trust in the love I could choose rather than the love I was owed, and that choice became my source of strength. Over time, the pain softened into understanding, the anger faded into acceptance, and the emptiness transformed into empowerment. I realized that our worth is not measured by the attendance of others at pivotal moments, but by the resilience we demonstrate. In their absence, my wedding day, once filled with silence and disappointment, now shines as a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of self-respect, and the beauty of creating your own circle of love. I am no longer defined by those who chose not to come, but by the life I have built, the love I have nurtured, and the joy I have embraced. That day taught me that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can control how we rise above them. And so, when I walk through life, I do so with pride, with courage, and with the knowledge that even in the face of rejection or absence, we can create moments of profound beauty, happiness, and connection, moments that truly belong to us, moments that remind us that family is not always given, but can be consciously and lovingly chosen. My story is not just about a wedding that lacked attendees. It is about resilience, about reclaiming joy, and about discovering that sometimes, the greatest celebrations in life are the ones we give ourselves.